it's like when you see a nice concrete slab poured, and they always seem to put the drains in the wrong place. Like there's a massive puddle over there, and there's a drain over there which has got no water around it. Yeah, that's a classic. Thomas, because I guess we're sitting here because of our chat that we had a couple of weeks ago. How does this sort of intersect with your business? Like, how did you guys sort of come across each other for a start, and then is it something that you'd recommend to your clients as well?
I think it's one. We'll always go somewhere and help someone else with a roof leak or a membrane leak, and then sort of as we're packing up, and this has happened for a decade, is would you be able to come down to our basement and what can we do here? And sort of always been like, well, that's a tanking thing. And my answer before was, so there is people who do concrete injection and that sort of stuff, but people can spend a lot of money doing that and really only move the leaks. You still have the leak. And then finally came across Newton Systems, and it was sort of like, well, we just let it happen and deal with it. Like the concrete's not being damaged. That was a misconception I had too, like that the concrete, but really concrete's denser than water, so it's not.
It's always wet.
Yeah,
it's always wet. Yeah.
So it's just going around it, really.
Zone. Yeah. It's it goes back to the standards as well, and that's the New Zealand standards and codes and the British standards. So we have a standard just for waterproofing, which has changed our industry. That came out and really sort of had presence in the 1990s. There's a court case as well that really influenced that. And insurance companies, they were bearing the cost of a lot of poor design, poor workmanship. So the standards here, and one of the things in both standards is quite clear, is form of feasibility, consequence of failure, and then form of feasibility. So really, when you're designing a system, you should be designing it with in mind that there may be failure, and how do I get back to remedy that system? And the answer is, with tanking systems, on many occasions it's virtually impossible, or if it is possible, very expensive
to take it back.
So and that's why the two forms of waterproofing, because we've got the standard, the two forms of waterproofing, so that consideration has come in. Okay, so that's failed. How do I get back? How do I deal with it? We can't, so we're gonna detail in or design in a fail-safe system so that we can maintain it and monitor it throughout the life of the building. And that's again where this cavity drain system has really sort of picked up. So you've got consequence of failure, form of feasibility.
I like that comment that you made about like just let it happen and then deal with it, manage it. Because we've managed buildings over the years where people have driven themselves nuts, like owners have driven themselves nuts, like wanting to fix that little leak in the basement car park. And they're going, oh, we need to fucking stop that, it's going to ruin the concrete, ruin the building. And it's like, so to hear you say that is actually really like reassuring, because quite often you can't stop these bloody leaks. They might be even like a couple of stories underground. And you're like, well, okay, you're going to spend like $100,000 digging a hole and then try and find out where it is, or how do you even find where it's coming from? You'd have to do dye testing and all sorts of shit.
And it comes. It's just massive investigation. And as Thomas said, you inject water will take the path of least resistance. So if you stop it at one point, it will. And if it's coming through, I mean, what you're relying on is that tanking behind is fully bonded, and you've got a defect, and you can see the defect, and the water's coming through. You've isolated that. You've dealt with it. In an ideal world, it's gone. But over time and over many years, those systems break down. You don't know when you've gone from site, what's happened to your system afterwards. If it's been exposed for too long, if the tradies have smashed the out of it.
That's one of your common things, eh? Your bloody nice membranes and stuff after that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got and trying to chase water, it's just not going to happen unless you have all those things come into play, and you're like, yep, no, this is fine. We saw it just before you covered it up. Perfect. So we know that leak's coming from there because it's fully bonded.